Hello, my name is Sydney Cherry, and this is my research presentation where I will be talking about the topic of transgender athletes in sports. So we are going to look at the overview right now. So first we're going to look at the thesis, where I'm going to state my thesis for the topic and the project. Second, we're going to look at the unfair advantages, which is the unjust advantages and opportunities. Third, we're going to look at injuries, which is risks and injuries at stake. And youth transgenders, we're going to look at transgenders in schools and youth. So we are going to start with my thesis, where it states, transgender athletes should not be permitted to compete in sports of their preferred gender because they can cause serious injuries and may have unfair advantages against their cisgender opponents. A little footnote here is that a cisgender person is somebody who identifies as the gender they were born as versus transgender. So ultimately, a cisgender and a transgender person are complete opposites. So moving on to the next slide, we are going to talk about the unfair advantages and opportunities that transgenders may have over their opponents. So first, we're going to talk about genetics, and second, we are going to talk about hormones. So when it comes to genetics, I have formed my opinion around researchers who have done deep study. So along with their opinion, I have also come to the conclusion that genetics are just so powerful when it comes to athletes or humans in general, that even though a transgender athlete may not be intentionally using their genetics as a harmful advantage, but it may come across that this athlete is so strong because she used to be a male, and she can easily defeat her opponent because it's ultimately male genetics versus female genetics rather than female versus female. So on the contrary to genetics, we have hormones, and everybody knows what hormones are. In this case, we are referring to them as testosterone and estrogen, which is the male versus female hormones. So study shows that one of the suggestions that was made by officials was that once a male transitions to a female, they should be forced to take estrogen so that they can be more like their female opponent and, lessen their testosterone, lessen their muscle mass, things like that. They can result in more of a female outcome. However, there were some opposing opinions that were expressed in regards to this suggestion because people were still concerned that just because a male is now a female doesn't mean that their testosterone levels can be completely canceled. However, people were concerned that most of these athletes who go through these transitions are older, so by the time a male transitions to a female, they would have already hit puberty and have already gained all of their testosterone levels as a full-grown male. If they would have transitioned as a younger, very younger person, where they could have stopped the testosterone levels because they didn't hit puberty yet, it would be a different story because the estrogen would be strong enough. But because a lot of these athletes are grown males and their testosterone levels are so high to fulfill a man, that the estrogen will not be strong enough to cancel the testosterone, and they will still go in there with unfair advantages and possibly even result in injuries. So moving on, I will now talk about luck versus skill, and you might be wondering, how does that have anything to do with sports? So I'm going to break it down for you. Obviously, on the slide, it says luck are the cards that an athlete happens to be dealt, just like any other person, athlete or not. And skill is how much an athlete trains, or any person, how much skill a person has towards work or sports or school or anything of that sort. So digging deeper into this luck versus skill theory, it was a very big debate between researchers, as in, do athletes have luck or do they have skill? And breaking that down even further, it was more of the fact that all athletes are dealt some type of luck in their life. So one athlete may be more strong, another athlete may have more athletic ability, somebody else may have complete extreme genetics where it just puts them above all, completely disregarding any transgender, cisgender, anything like that. A man could easily be stronger than a woman, or a woman could easily be stronger than a man just because of the luck they were dealt in their life between genetics or athletic ability or anything of the sort in regards to sports. However, the other half of researchers stated that skill was how athletes get to where they are supposed to be. And I honestly fall in between the two. I think, yes, some people are dealt different cards than others, where they are stronger, they are more athletic, they are faster, and it puts them above all in their sports of choice, versus the fact that skill is all depending on how hard somebody wants to work. If I put in more work than my opponent, then I should obviously get the win because I am the one that's putting in the time and building my skill versus my opponent. So moving on to my next slide is kind of a backup to the luck versus skill slide, where you will see a picture of Michael Phelps, and I assume everyone knows who Michael Phelps is, but in case you don't, it is listed here on the slide. And he comes into my project because there were multiple sources where I found him being used as an example, and in one source, it said that he's an incredible swimmer, obviously an Olympic gold medalist several times over and over. We all know this, but it was debated on the fact that he might be just winning because of luck, because he was genetically built for this sport. And for those who don't know, he obviously has a huge wingspan because of his height, and he is double jointed, and he has a size 14 feet. And any of those can contribute to any sport, but specifically swimming, where he has the wingspan for strokes, the double jointedness for more mobility, and the size 14 feet for basically flippers, if you want to say that. But the other side of the argument noted that he has worked very hard to become an Olympic gold medalist. No one is dealt that much luck where they just become an Olympist without trying and training their skill. So in this slide, it kind of feeds into my Michael Phelps and luck versus skill slide. So this is a picture of Fallon Fox, and we will get more into her later on. But Fallon Fox is a male to female transgender MMA fighter. So Fallon Fox was born as a male and later transitioned into a female, for those of you that may not know. So moving on to the next slide, I said I would dig a little bit deeper into Fallon Fox, so this is where this starts. So this is a press picture of Fallon Fox and Tamika Brents. So Fallon Fox is the transgender female, so she was born a male and is now a female, and Tamika Brents is her cisgender opponent, so Tamika Brents was born a female and is still a female. So on September 13th of 2014, there was a fight between Fallon Fox and Tamika Brents, and it was approved, and it went through all the right protocols, and it was supposed to just be another female versus female fight. However, there were things that went wrong because Fallon Fox's male genetics had taken over, and she ended up injuring Tamika Brents very badly. So not even halfway through this fight between Fallon Fox and Tamika Brents, it was right after round 1, Tamika Brents had to be taken to the hospital because she had a concussion, an orbit fracture, and a severe scalp laceration where she needed 7 staples put in her head, just because Fallon Fox had, not intentionally, but had ended up injuring her so bad because her male genetics just took over. She did not mean to do any harm any more than what the sport already endures, because MMA is very intense, but she didn't go in there with the drive and the will to purposefully hurt her opponent any more than the goal of winning. But it just happened to be that the male hormones and the male genetics took over during this one fight and put her opponent in the hospital to the point where she almost had to stop fighting. So this next slide is actually a quote from Tamika Brents herself in relation to the fight, and she states, "Fox's grip was different from other females fighters I have faced, and I had never felt so overpowered during a match." And in other sources, Tamika Brents has stated that she was a very well-prepared female. She considered herself to be on the stronger side of females in general. You know, she is trained, she's worked, she was born stronger, but something about this fight against Fallon Fox, whenever she was being hit or whenever she felt the hands on her body, she could just feel the difference. It didn't feel like a female for obvious reasons. It felt like a man, and she was genuinely scared and genuinely fearing her safety in this match. So my last point is transgenders in schools and youth, and I know the whole presentation we've really been focusing on older athletes, which is why I wanted to bring some youth groups into it, considering schools, ages, preteens, young adults, things like that. So in today's society, transgenders are obviously becoming a lot more accepted, and they have been for a few years now, but even more so, younger generations are being accepted into the transgender community by their parents, coaches, friends, things like that. So in regards to sports, I figured there are definitely student athletes out there, no matter what age, that have a conflict of interest where they're not happy with themselves and they want to transition to the opposite gender, or they have to stick with their sport because they know that as a transgender athlete, they will not be accepted onto the other team. So they have to pick a side, which I could not imagine having to decide between being unhappy with myself or doing what's right and possibly losing the sport that I love. However, in regards to sports, I completely understand where a young mind might be coming from when they say they want to transition, whether it be 100% committed or they just want to experiment a little bit, whichever. But when it comes to sports, I feel as though there are a lot of athletes that need to be considered, and it should not just be about the transgender athlete, it should also be about all of the other athletes on the team. And rather than making the other athletes be comfortable with something and forcing them to be comfortable with something, it should be discussed and it should be talked about rather than forcing them to be accepting, because some people just might not be. And the last thing you want to do is cause division or controversy in a team, especially of young adults where they don't need that negativity. So in terms of education, it was suggested in one of my sources that coaches should take it upon themselves to talk about people's preferred pronouns to the other athletes and coaching staff. So basically, everyone should sit in a circle and go around and say their preferred pronouns. And while I think that's fine, I do slightly disagree with it because I feel as though there are mistakes that happen sometimes. So somebody may be transitioning to a female and say, my pronoun is her, she, her. And somebody may accidentally call them he or him because that's what they know, that's what they're used to. It takes a minute for it to click, or it takes a couple days or weeks for them to get used to, oh, they want to change their pronoun. But as soon as somebody mistakes their wrong pronoun, they could easily get offended and it could easily cause a fight, an outbreak, division, what have you, between the team. And the last thing you want on a team is division, especially with young adults where it can roll into drama, bullying, or things like that. And going off of that, it then falls into the locker rooms where it said that transgender athletes should have specific locker rooms, but rather it being male and female, there should be 4. So there's male, female, and then there's transgender female, transgender male, so that everyone is comfortable. And while I don't disagree with that, I feel everyone should have their preferred places. However, then you have to add more rooms into the schools, and not every school will do that just because of one team. So people may have to change in the bathroom, people may have to take turns in the locker rooms. It might be uncomfortable because these are young preteens mostly that are not preteens, young adults that may not know how to react to this type of thing, and being in uncomfortable situations can again result in bullying and things like that, which is where I move on to my next point of division, where if people are bullied or if people are uncomfortable, it can cause either transgender athletes to quit the team at a extreme level, or it can cause the cisgender athletes as well, people that may say, hey, I don't want to deal with this, I don't want to have to go through all of these steps, I want to quit the team. So you could end up having people quit on either side. You could end up resulting in bullying. You could end up things of that nature. And I feel as though if transgenders were just not permitted to compete in these sports, it would wash away all of those problems. So in my conclusion, I've stated, while transgenders mean no harm and simply just want to be treated equally, which I completely agree with and feel for them, I believe that everyone's safety and equality should come first rather than being one-sided. I suggest for this topic to be researched further, and officials should start to consider making transgender sports teams for those transgender athletes that wish to participate. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my presentation, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.